You're here.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dimitri.
Oh, cool. Yeah, before I start my speech, just a disclaimer, I was not supposed to debate, and I literally learned about this 7 minutes ago, so this might not be optimal, but we'll do what we can. So I'm going to start my speech. So first of all, I want to clarify the model, right? I think we're going to redistribute money in the following way. So first of all, there's going to be the sum of money that is going to be equal, that is going to be given to all of the higher educational institutions in the United States that are accredited by independent bodies. But secondly, there are also going to be additional bonuses in terms of how well a university performs in the national-wide rankings. So those would be, aggregate statistics based on the different independent rankings that we would compile a ranking of institutions and we'll give them bonuses based on that. But the large portion of redistribution will still come from the same base of money that would be given to literally everyone. I would say that the purpose of this action is to create a more equitable educational system in which there are fewer differences between the universities and in which we have, better overall average quality of education, and therefore creating better conditions for the majority of people within the system. So, and this is the only argument that I was able to write in 7 minutes, so I'm going to focus on that. We're going to have a more equal system of education. So what is the problem with the status quo? I think that in the status quo, there are very few colleges that concentrate the most amount of donations for their endowment. I think that those are schools like Harvard, Yale, or Stanford, and there are a couple of reasons for this. I think the major one is that those schools are the ones that have the biggest reputations, and therefore, attract also the most investments, but also those might be historic reasons that are also tied to the reputation. But I also think that it might also be things like perception among the business leaders within different things and things of that sort. We think that this creates a couple of problems, this concentration. So first of all, it means that there is a significant disproportion in terms of how much money those top colleges get from literally the richest investors, from people in different countries whose rich kids go to those schools as well. We think that that means that their largest portion of money goes to those schools, which we think is problematic because then only few people are able to get the benefits that money allows those schools to build. But secondly, we think that also this concentration of resources among very few schools also reinforces their educational reputation in the system, which means a couple of harms. First of all, I think that if you graduate from another school, your job prospects are much smaller, which is true for literally the majority of the population in the United States. But secondly, it is also the harm in terms of the self-perception, because if you feel like you're going to a subprime school, you feel like the educational opportunities at that school are also lacking due to the lack of significant funding. We think that it also influences how you value yourself, and therefore your ability to be happy with the 4 years that you're spending at that school, and also after that when you enter the job market, right? We think that another thing is that this concentration of resources allows those schools to suck in resources from other schools. So on the comparative, in a more, in a system where we wouldn't have such a large concentration of funding within those schools, we think that the investments would likely go to other schools as well, and it would incentivize them to develop. I think that another problem of this monopolization is that these few top schools that we have don't really have an incentive to be super competitive, as in they already have large reputation, they already have enough resources, which means that they don't have the incentive to always improve themselves and improve their infrastructure and their academia, as in they already have enough and they don't, they know that they don't have to necessarily exert their best efforts to improve. But secondly, I think that the schools that do have an incentive to improve, such as like lower ranked schools, don't have the funds for this. So what is the change that is going to happen on our side of the house? We think that when we get a significant redistribution of endowment, all schools in the United States are going to have much like average ranked schools that in the status quo don't have that money are going to have more of that. And we think that that money is going to allow those schools to have great opportunities, right? So first of all, obviously government is going to check on how effectively those institutions are spending that money. I think that that's pretty clear. What is that money going to allow to do? So first of all, in terms of development, I think they would be able to build better infrastructure. So for example, better labs for sciences, maybe better stadiums for sports, which would also create a better educational environment, maybe better libraries, provide students with access to gyms, those things that increase the net happiness of students and therefore their productivity. But also they would be able to pay higher salaries to professors, therefore attracting more qualified people towards those schools, but also competing with the private sector for very qualified individuals. I think that writ large, that is going to mean that we are going to have a higher quality of average education in the United States. So schools that are now ranked averagely or lower are going to have much better conditions for students. And I think that that is going to improve the quality of education of those people, which is important, first of all, because I think that people are going to enjoy their time more when they understand that they're getting the best that their school can provide, and when they're getting more resources than they otherwise would on the opposition side. So I think that the quality of education and the quality of your time increases, providing you therefore the net happiness within those 4 years, but also after that. How? Because we think that when the education level and when the education in the United States sort of levels, because we have competition that is much tighter now between the schools because their resources are more compatible. We think that the quality of people that they graduate is also going to be much closer to one another, which is obviously going to create a much tighter competition on the labor market. But I think that this is actually good. So first of all, I think that this is good for businesses because now there are going to be more qualified individuals for you to hire, for you to choose from, which means that you're probably going to end up picking the individuals that are most qualified for a certain position. I think that this is very important for businesses because even if you increase the quality of graduates by like 5%, that is writ large on the scale of economy is an immense benefit to how effective the businesses can operate and how effective your economy might be. To provide you examples of what that effectiveness looks like, those would be, making sure that the workforce is more productive because they have better education and therefore reducing the cost that the businesses would incur otherwise, therefore being able to, spend more money into development and therefore reducing cost of their further services or their further products, which is beneficial for the entirety of people within the United States and also abroad. But also, I think that it is good for people that the labor market is more tight and competitive because that means that the market is likely to adapt to the quality of the graduate students. What I mean by that is that if you have generally higher qualified people, for example, in sciences or humanities, it is more likely that you're going to have more startups or more companies investing in startups, so like corporate startups that are more secure than regular startups in this sort of more innovative sector of the economy, therefore creating new jobs for those highly skilled people, but also providing more innovation, which is also beneficial because the main aim of innovation is to optimize something that is suboptimal right now, therefore, again, reducing costs, which is very beneficial. So for all those reasons, vote OG.
We'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech and call upon the leader of the opposition. Here.
So it's starting on, okay. Okay, fine. You can hear me, right? Yeah, okay, great. So, dear panel, just one judge. 3 points in my speech today. First of all, I'm going to explain to you why we think that the distribution that we have today, where some elites are concentrated in some institutions, is actually good for research, good for education. Second of all, we'll explain to you why I think it's not legitimate to redistribute the money that people donate. Third of all, we'll explain to you why I think that tomorrow the amount of donations at all will be reduced. Before that, 3 points of rebuttal. So please note about the speech of the previous speaker that it doesn't really clear from his speech how does the reputation of the institution actually changes. It doesn't explain. So I mean, it's really probable that the rich kids will still go to the same schools. It's really probable that the tuition amount will still remain high in those schools. It means that the libraries in Harvard will still be the best libraries in the country, or the laboratories and etc. The competition between institutions probably won't change, and this means that the reputation of the institutions will remain the same. Now, please note what is really problematic about the PM's speech, because his entire analysis and impacts about the industry and startups and the level education is actually based on this point of reputation, and there the analysis is lacking. Hence, you can't accept the impacts about the larger impacts about startups and the industry and all those other stuff. Second point of rebuttal. Please note that today we actually think that because of those donations that are going to the Ivy Leagues, we have more opportunity for poor students, for discriminated students from discriminated backgrounds or stuff like that, to actually go to those Ivy Leagues because now they have the extra money. Like after they're making sure that their reputation is big, after they're making sure that their libraries are the best libraries, after they're making sure that the rich kids are doing fine because this is where their money coming from. Now we have the extra to give to all those poor children and bring them to our school. Third point of rebuttal. Please note that if there is such a huge gap inside the US between the institution, and if the government believes that this gap is bad, then the government should intervene itself and not like throw this responsibility on donations and universities. It means that take more like progressive taxes in order to do those things, and not just create a smoke screen where you throw this responsibility on the donations or on the institutions themselves. Let's go to our case. Now, first point, we believe that there is some amount of good being done when you actually make more areas where the expertise are being developed. Like, for example, Harvard is very good at law. For example, MIT is really good at mathematics and real studies and stuff like this. And because it has this good reputation, because it has those good facilities, most of the good professors and good researchers, like the extremely good people in this exact area, are going to these universities, making them the best in their fields. We believe that this sort of concentration was the word I was looking for, concentration of knowledge is actually good. Why we believe this concentration is good? First of all, we believe because you have the best peers you can imagine in your own institution, it creates a more quality research. It means that now it is easier to create collaboration. It's easier to take two of the best researchers of this field and make them work together. Second, we believe it creates a better education. Now, it means that education for the students. It means that because like Harvard has all the best professors in all the law field, not only tort law, not only like international law, but all of those courses has the best professors. It means that the law students that are studying there will be experts not only in one field, but the students will gain the better education in all those fields. Now, because we believe that those schools are offering enough opportunities for people to actually be accepted, because there is some meritocratical level of acceptance, because there are scholarships, because there are of loans and stuff like this, there are giving opportunities for some opportunities for all people, and in the end they are making the best people in order to promote this research. And please note, we believe that the purpose of the academy is not only education, it's also to promote research, it's also to make our country the best place to work and live, make America great again and all those stuff. Now let's go to our second point. Now, why we believe it's not legitimate to actually take this money from donations and redistribute them. We believe that when you donate to a specific institution, you donate to it in order to express your own identity. You donate to there because, like, your deceased son went to this college, because you yourself went to this college. You want a building on your own name. You want a specific scholarship on your name in this institution. Now, higher education is a huge part of our identities. Like, if I'm a Yale Bulldog, that I'm a Yale Bulldog for life. This is part of who I am as a person. And we believe that when I'm choosing where to allocate my donation, my money, this means that if the state is infringing on this donation and then taking it to other institutions, this is an infringement on my own right for property, my own right to express my own identity, and we think that is wrong. Now, please note that from this analysis, we also, by the way, there was no POIs offered, I think. Now, please understand that from this analysis, we also believe that the entire amount of donations tomorrow will be lower. Again, because I explained to you that I am a lot of times donating money to a specific institution to express my identity, to express my connections to it, to express my love for this specific institution. Now, moreover, note that today when I want to like donate money to the entire education field and not to a specific university, I usually donate money to lower education. This is, by the way, this is where most of the gaps are created between society, in high schools, in places where you can't, in places where you can't even reach basic education in order to get to Ivy Leagues there. And hence we believe that the amount of donations will be less tomorrow. We believe that donations are very important to your own identity, and we believe that concentration of it's good. So we're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech and call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Well, just a second, I'm organizing my notes. So this speech is mostly going to be rebuttal and then some smart ideas that I could think during the previous speech. So first of all, on the rebuttal, first thing that they tell you extraneously is that reputation is still going to remain under our side. Therefore, like, people are still not going to, I guess, donate to other institutions. So first of all, I think that we do change the reputation because the reputation matters based on the quality of people that exit your institution after they've spent some years educating there. I think that given that you buy our analysis about how people are going to get better education with larger number of schools, bigger schools are going, like other schools are going to increase their reputation, therefore being able to actually attract more investments in the long term. The reason for that would be is actually also refuting their analysis about why overall amount of donations will decrease, is that when you see that there are more institutions that are doing better research because they have better lab facilities and better professors, and also smarter students because they're able to get access to better resources, we think that that means that more institutions are able to provide better research. Now notice that companies always, or governments, like many of the times, outsource research to universities because they might have specific unique facilities that you as a business might not have. So that is specifically true for small or medium-sized businesses that are doing research in a specific field. Also business, so I think that many times donations do come from businesses to universities for a specific purpose. Now I think that those schools in the status quo that can't afford to that like won't specifically from their donation get a specific research project at Harvard school, better schools like Harvard or Yale, because they get much higher donations from Microsoft and Google, can't really compete with those schools for specific, to require those businesses to do like certain research, right? Whereas we think that for average schools, it's much more likely that those businesses would be able to donate to those schools and therefore get the research that they want, which we think is good. Secondly, they tell you that the current system provides more opportunities for poor kids because they like schools like Ivy League. So first of all, it's still very hard to get into those schools. So it's only opportunities for a very few. But also notice that because of the reputation, essentially, the cost of education at Ivy League schools is very inflated, which means that they also spend a lot more money to fund a full scholarship of one student. If you redistribute that money so that more averagely ranked schools have more money, the scholarship that now allows one student at an Ivy League to attend it now allows two students at an average school to attend it. Therefore, there are more poor people on our side of the house when schools have than average schools where education costs less are able to provide those scholarships. But second of all, they do have an incentive to provide those scholarships because they still have to compete for students. And if you are a poor student who's able to be bright, those schools are going to compete on our side for that using the funds. The reason why they don't do this in the status quo enough is because they don't have that much funding to be able to afford it, which they now do on our side of the house. Now, the first argument of theirs is that the concentration is good because it allows for a certain specialization, like Harvard specializes in law and MIT in mechanics. Notice that schools on our side can still specialize in one thing, so that doesn't go away. Therefore, this benefits of like you being able to exist in an environment where most people are doing what you do and therefore getting inspired and getting synergy, all that stuff still exists on our side of the house. We do bite the harm that the quality of that education at super top universities is going to decrease. But I actually think that the fact that there is one MIT that is always, and like maybe Caltech, two schools that are better than other schools, means that they don't have that much of an incentive under the status quo to compete extensively, because they know that due to their reputation and due to the fact that they have like good employer rankings and returns and feedbacks and like smarter students on the entrance of the universities, they do have to do much less than other schools. So they're not actually pushed to provide better research and are not pushed to allocate their resources as effectively as they would on our side of the house when competing and producing, as the best quality research is the only thing that can help them compete. And competition still matters, because the higher you are in our aggregate ranking, the more money you get, right? So we actually get more incentives for that competition. Then they tell you that the overall amount of donations is going to decrease. First of all, the reason is that you want to express your identity and you're no longer to express your identity on our side of the house. Now, look, if you donate to education on our side, that still means that part of that funding is going to go to the institution that you wanted to go. You just don't know which part, which means that if you want to, pay tribute to the institution that you went to, you're still going to be able to do this on our side of the house, because at least some portion of it is going to go. But sure, even if we buy the harm that some people who do invest for that reason are not going to do this anymore, we think that on our side of the house, other actors get an incentive to donate in the education institutions. So many times your donation is motivated by whether you believe that the school has good values, or whether the school actually is doing good in the community and therefore deserves more financial help, right? So people do donate because they want to help institutions if they see that they're doing good things for the society. I think that now when you see that institutions are getting more money writ large and therefore are able to allocate and have the incentives to allocate those resources effectively based on the checks programs that we are going to institute, right? We think that there is more visibility that those schools are providing social good, therefore incentivizing people who care about that donating in the education system even more. But secondly, I think many people in the United States are concerned with making the education system more equitable so as to afford more people to go to better quality schools. I think that this is specifically true for large businesses who care about not only their social corporate responsibility as a bonus, but who also would like to see better quality labor force in their field so that they can choose the most qualified individuals to employ. I think that those individuals would also have an incentive to invest in such spheres. Sure. And lastly, I'm going to talk about legitimacy. They say that the stuff about identity, right? So I think that there is a larger principle claim on our side of the house. I think that we're helping the most unprivileged people. Notice that your acceptance into Harvard, MIT, or Yale literally depends on how much money your parents have and how much they're able to, afford tutors for you and send you to a private school and hire someone who helps you submit your application to the university. So that it's largely determined by wealth. But wealth is arbitrary, as in no one has a choice into which family they're born. Therefore, the amount of wealth they have is arbitrary. Therefore, those people who have that wealth in the status quo and are able to donate don't have a better claim to that wealth than everyone else who is underprivileged. We would say that underprivileged actually have a bigger claim to that wealth because they're the ones who are suffering in society more than the individuals who have that wealth. Given the arbitrariness of wealth, regardless of the consequences, we think that it should be given to the individuals for whom the pain would be alleviated better or suffering. And we clearly illustrate in the first constructive arguments in the PM how getting a better overall education is more beneficial for the least well off in the society. We think that that trumps any harms that you receive on up towards the rich people who don't feel like their identity is upheld. Thank you.
Would like to thank the speaker for the fine speech and close the top of this debate here for the deputy of the opposition.
Yeah, just a second, the stopwatch, sorry. Okay, so Mr. Speaker, in my speech, two main points, why we think this would be for the academia as a whole and why this would be also bad for people of minorities that now would be stuck in the really average university instead of going to the universities of the elite in which they will get a better education and their ability to actually go further in life. So first, some points of rebuttal. So what do we hear? from opening. They say, but note, this will improve science in other places, and thus we will have, I don't know, more competition, more entrepreneur, more good science. But they are ignoring the fact that that will lead to reduce of the quality of science in the top elite universities, which usually produce the best science, the one that actually help the science world, and that is much more harmful than having some average university science. In addition to that, we have lots of garbage science nowadays, and we don't want to promote that. We do want to focus mainly on the elite science rather than the rubbish one that we have in other places. Not to mention the fact that we have today inflation of graduates, and we don't want to have that. In addition to that, he said, but people can still specialize in specific fields in specific university, but he's ignoring the fact that Anna said that now people donate to specific faculty inside a specific place because they know it's the best, and that how the money would be efficient, and that won't be able to be achieved under the road because now we don't have the money to have the top researchers in specific field in the same university, which is crucial, as my partner analyzed. And he says, but note, you can still donate because part of your money will go to your institution. It would be so a small amount that like it's redundant to think that it would be significant. So a few things. First of all, why we think this would be bad for the academia as a whole, starting from the fact that we think that note that this is not a universal technique. He say, but no, this is justified because there is some inequality in the world. Some inequality might be okay if it's on a meritocratic basis, and we think that this mechanism that allow private donation actually lead to more meritocracy. Why? As my partner explained, no, the universities nowadays have their own trust funds due to previous money, and they do make students pay. What we think is that most of the private money that comes today is being shifted into scholarship or into specific research inside the university. When we don't have that, we see exactly what's happening today. In when we got public criticizing how much money they have to pay in universities, they just canceled scholarships and or just lowered the payment for everyone, which was harmful specifically to smart people coming from disadvantaged group, which couldn't reach those universities. And we think this is devastating for them, specifically because we'd rather have that really smart guy coming from a disadvantaged community and him going to Harvard. Why? Because we think that being in an average university, doesn't enable you to evolve enough to evolve your community, to reach for the best and have the best science that you can have. In addition to that, we think that those specific people to go to the elite universities are the one that that lift their communities out of poverty, the one that are the role model for other people inside that community. So giving their metric, we think it would be much worse for them. Why we think that there would be less money in Southern universities? A, as my partner explained, but B, because we think that in the US, there is like this narrative that the government is really unofficial, and they donate specifically and disproportionately, by the way, to universities because they see themselves as people donating money for the country to evolve more in situation where usually government fail consistently, and governments are able to, and private universities are able to do that in a really good way. And this is why they donate much more money than to other fields. I forgot to turn on my camera. So in addition to that, let's note something. What opening is saying, okay, there's inequality and it's okay. Note that this mechanism isn't universal. They don't say that they should take all donation and just go directing it to the budget of the government. Why? Because they know that if it would be done on a large scale, people won't donate money. Why do they think that universities is different? This is a burden for their side. We will explain why universities is indeed different, and people will donate even less and less, which be really harmful to this science, as my partner explained. In addition to that, we think that the government is running away from its responsibility. Why? Because note that the government, instead of matching the donation that is being done today and directing more money to higher education, it want to dodge the criticism by the public and invest less money in universities because they have biases towards short term and they don't think for the long term and so on. And thus, instead of matching that money, they just want to redirect the donation. In addition to that, money is tangible, meaning that when we have free donation from the elite to those universities, that means that the government, instead of funding those universities that are already loaded with money, they can direct that money into universities from disadvantaged communities and so on. And when we don't have that money, we think that the first to be hurt, as always, are people that come from more poor areas, due to the fact that, like, usually they have less political pressure and the ability to redirect money, due to the fact that the donation usually cuts first there because people don't know them, no POI were offered to us. So we think that overall what we will have a situation which isn't just justified because the infringement on my right to property and to invest the money according to the identity as I see, which is crucial to the way that I define myself, and leading to much less donation, and those donations which usually nowadays are targeted to help minorities, which will harm them the most. As my partner explained, it will harm the academia really significantly because we wanted a concentration of a meritocratic elite, because we want the disadvantaged to go to Harvard and then for them to be concentrated, to have the collaboration with inside the same faculties, to get the pupil the best education that they can have in the elite universities, because that's how science is getting the most progress. For the most brilliant mind to go for the most brilliant places with loads of money coming from the private sectors, and not for the government running from its responsibility to do what it should do instead of smokescreen. More than happy to oppose. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech and the bottom half as a whole, and to continue to continue to the bottom half of this debate here for the member of government.
Hello. First of all, I will give a few sentences of rebuttal, and then I will introduce the three unique points that the closing government is going to bring to the round. So first of all, the rebuttal. The opening opposition claims that basically their main point is that we need this concentration of knowledge, we need this concentration of talented people in one place. We believe that they forget that the scientists, if we are talking about like some particular scientific projects that are happening, we believe that it is if we look at it from the utilitarian points of view, it is of course much more beneficial to provide more universities with at least one talented scientist, rather than having 3 talented scientists in one place. And second, it will not harm the overall results, like the scientific breakthroughs that will happen, because it is very common for scientists to collaborate, even if they come from different schools. So there is nothing that will harm the science in general, but at the same time, we will benefit more people at more universities, at more places. So second, we would like to note that the donations are not happening. You're saying that the private sector donates to those areas where the government is doing a bad job. We believe that the donors, or for example, like Harvard, other Ivy schools, they donate more because the alumni are just richer, and it has nothing to do with the government doing a good job or a bad job in one particular area. They just donate the money, and then it's the school's job to allocate the money as they want. That was the rebuttal. Now I'm going to talk about the 3 specific points that we bring to the round. First of all, we believe that the redistribution of donation money will not take away the ranking of those like Ivy schools like Harvard or Yale, because we believe that first of all, there are other sources of income for a university. First of all, it's the research grants that the university gets, and as long as Harvard and other schools have talented students, have good researchers, they will have the ranking. They will sustain the ranking. So we don't believe that like the system will just get like the educational system will just get like super average with like no good schools or bad schools. We believe that now the inequality is just too prominent, with the lower ranking schools being super under-resourced and underprivileged, and we believe this has to be addressed. So as long as those Harvard like Ivy schools have good scientific platforms, like researchers, they will still get the resources, they will still get the money. But we believe that because the donations money is like such a large sum of money, we believe that it is extremely important to redistribute it. And first of all, we think that it will be enough to like the money that comes from donations. It is large because we see that schools, like super rich schools like Harvard, are now introducing the new policies, for example, like the need blind policy, or like the policy to cancel like the admission fee or whatever. We believe that this is a really good sign of the school having like such a large sum of money from those donations. It's just to explain why we think it's a large sum of money. So we believe that if we redistribute this money, it will be enough to cover the research at like many other schools, improve the quality of the research, cover like the infrastructure, and also to cover the tuitions of students. So while we keep Harvard as brilliant as it is, with like other resources of income that can also like go to infrastructure, that can also go to funding like the talented students, we at the same time take the money from donations, like some part of money, as the OG already mentioned, some money from the Harvard donors will still go to Harvard. So we're taking a part of that money, and it goes to the lower, less schools, which are in the status quo extremely under-resourced, because it's just this vicious cycle that we see. The schools don't like the alumni of those lower ranked schools are not getting good jobs, and therefore they can't therefore they can't be like a donor for the school, and then it leads to like this cycle. So we believe in order to break the cycle, what is like the main point that we bring to the round, we believe that the lower ranked schools are the ones who need the money the most, and the money will help them break the cycle that is happening in status quo. So we believe that because like if we go deeper into the reason why like some students go to Harvard and some other students go to like lower ranked schools, most of the time it's not because like those are like genius talented students. It's because the parents are pouring so much money into this kid's education, so that they can afford so that they become so brilliant and so talented, which is obviously that they can go to Harvard. And in our world, we believe what we can do is what we end up with in the status quo is that the poorest students who had less, whose parents had less money to spend on their education, they get less opportunity to go to Harvard. So what we do in our world is we believe, because those poor students, they can't afford going to Okay, so because those students can't afford going to a college anyway, they need the money the most, they need the student aid the most, and this is what we are providing the schools with by this motion.
Sorry, I'm really gonna have to ask you to stop now because you're already more than 30 seconds over time. But...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we're really proud to propose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for the fine speech. Sorry, I have to cut you off because we were already at this point. So I'm now going to invite the member of the opposition here.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's start with the government side of the table, and then I will move on to our extension. Okay, so the first thing, what OG tells you is about how it's very important to have competition between like firms and on the labor market, between the schools and stuff like that. And we tell you that we would rather have a little bit of competition between like Stanford, Yale, Harvard, and so on, because they are the best, and we have a few of the best competing between each other, and that's how we get the best competition, because we have the best people competing against the best people, and that's how we're going to get more progress within them, because they already have the the potential. But if we have on the level of the whole state, we have every college having the same funds and having like average competition between average colleges, then we don't get the progress. We don't get the same fulfillment of potential, because we tell you that when CG tells you that Harvard and things and colleges like that already get some sort of science funds because of their research, because of how good they are, because of how talented their students are, this exactly proves the fact that these colleges truly have the best students. And we tell you that it is principally just to help the best students, because they are the ones who have the most potential, and they are the ones who will fulfill the potential if they get the most money that they do. And we tell you that every penny taken away from the smartest people who can truly make great things is a penny wasted. Because the smartest people are the ones who make breakthroughs, who invent new things that actually propel the humanity as a whole forward, who propel like people's quality of life and stuff like that. So we believe that we should concentrate on them and help them as much as we can. Now, when we talk about truly underprivileged people from like bad families and very poor people, we tell you that these are people who are already underprivileged before like they come to college. Like, this is not solving anything, because they are underprivileged in their elementary school education, in their high schools. Like, if they are in the ghetto and go to schools that are like falling apart, they are not getting any sort of quality education as is. They're probably they have a lot of stuff going on. They're not concentrating on school. I mean, no one can blame them, but it's just the way it is. They don't have really potential to, once they get to college, to be great. And we tell you that like giving more money to colleges that are lower class is not their solution to the underprivileged class not getting quality education, because they're already fucked up much before than they came to college. So we believe that this has no impact. And again, we tell you that these colleges have some sort of scholarships that they do give to very, very talented people who are underprivileged, and despite all those circumstances still show great results. Like, my friend from fucking middle class family in Zagreb in Croatia got a scholarship for MIT. Like, it's really not that elite, and they actually do have like scouts that go to other schools, either other high schools, and offer places at the college for truly the best students, no matter how much money they have. Now, when we talk about CG and how they tell us that they have this sort of idealistic idea of how we will have like the best schools will still be the best, but then we'll have more money for the lower class schools. Like, no, if you take money from someone else, it's a zero-sum game. If you take some money for someone else, they don't have it. And you know, it's not, you can't have perfect solutions for every school. And we already explained to you why we are ready to prioritize the best schools in order to have the best possible results from smart people. And again, we told you that like they proved that through these science funds that these schools really have the most talented people. And like this actually like really lowers their impact, because if you take the money from donations from really the best schools, then like it must not be that much money for like Harvard not to experience like immense consequences of this. Like there will still be a huge gap within that. And again, like this is our this is the mechanism that we support, and the principle that we support, that once you take a scholarship that would fund one student who is the best and give them a full scholarship to a great college, and not do that but give like half scholarships to a few students who are maybe not the best, and give them like average education and not the best one, the best education, we tell you that this is not okay, because we would rather have one amazing person who will do great for society rather than a few average people who will not make a change, who will like work at average firms and, you know, not really just keep things at the status quo. Now, what is our case essentially? We tell you that it's not principally justified for the state to take away these donations, to take away from private colleges, from their money, from private like people and actors who are giving money to private colleges. We don't think that the state has a right to meddle within that. Why? Because firstly, we think that the state meddles enough. Like we give taxes to the state and stuff like that. Like the state is already controlling all of our lives. And we believe that once you are a person in like liberal democracies within capitalism, then you are living in a system where you are responsible to make your own money. No one is helping you, and you should like you're the one responsible for that. So once you do get your money, we think that you have the right to do whatever you want with it. And because private colleges are getting the money through alumni and stuff like that, because they gave the alumni the best possible education, the alumni went on to have great jobs and to get much money, and then they give it back to the college because the college was great, because the college gave them everything they have, and they like went through like self-fulfillment through the education that they got. So we tell you that the state should not meddle in this, because the colleges are the ones who are responsible for getting all of these donations because of their work, because of how well they manage the college and all that. And that's because the state has nothing to do with the college. The state has nothing to do with how well the college is and how it manages it, and with anything that the college does. That's why we believe that the money the college gets from their management is truly theirs, and the state has nothing to do with it. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for this fine speech, and to conclude the gov case of this debate, here for the government whip.
Okay, thank you. First of all, one of the main questions of today's debate was about the quality of education, whether it will worsen with the proposed mechanism or will it be better. And what the opposition side tells us is that the concentration of intelligent people is now in these Ivy League universities, in these rich universities like Harvard and so on, and that's why it's better to teach one great student, for instance, giving him or her a scholarship at this prestigious university than teaching many average students. But we believe that we won't teach many average students. This is what status quo is like. In these poor universities, they don't have enough resources, they don't have enough good specialists there who can provide a good quality education for the students. And we believe that it is actually better to redistribute this money, because we will help more people, because studying at these Ivy League universities at Harvard is extremely expensive. And even if this money from donations will partially go to give education to one, maybe two people, we can actually hire a good specialist, a good professor at one of the universities which now lack those specialists, and it will make the quality of education in this particular subject at the whole university better. So we have not only one person who gets this education in this one good university and gets better career opportunities, we have more students on our side of the house who benefit from this system. And also we believe like that not only intelligence is the prime cause of you getting in this good university or not. So also your wealth is the prime factor, because the amount of wealth your parents had to give you a good education prior to you entering the university. So we believe that our mechanism actually helps those who may not have this wealthy background, because now in the status quo, those parents who are rich, they are able to provide for their children going to Harvard, and they can provide the good education prior to this, and also funding for this child to get there. Okay, your question.
If this amount of money is as substantial as you say, why wouldn't Ivy League universities raise the admission fees to make it even more elite and even better for the elites and even worse for the poor people trying to go to these universities?
Well, if this is a large amount of money, I didn't understand your question why they need to raise fees actually. We believe that right now they have a lot of money and they don't need this type of money. What your side is trying to say is that they will actually lack this money, but we believe that they still have this infrastructure, they still already have this equipment, and they already have some investments into the research, into nice specialists, and into this good education. And what we do is like, we believe that this gap between the universities in the United States is too high, and that if you are from not so privileged background, that you won't be able to get this quality education. But we believe that this redistribution is very important, because it will be beneficial for these people who go to this university, and then they become a good specialist at their job, and thus the business is also advantageous in our side of the house, because at their side of the house, in the status quo, like the situation is that, yes, of course, a very small amount of people, they get this scholarship, and the majority of people still go to these colleges where tuition fee is lower. The point of private donators, and the point that the opposition is trying to make, that, well, you should be able to operate with your own money. We actually believe that, well, still part of that sum of money that you donate will go to your university. So you will still have an incentive to donate money, because you will know that you still have the educational system. But we believe that if you are, first of all, we've explained, the universities of this Ivy League, these universities which are of top levels, they just have alumni who earn more money, who can support the universities better, and that's why the funds in those universities, these donations, are larger than in other universities. And we believe that we need to redistribute this money, because like Harvard will still have some part of this money, so you still know that you are helping the university. But we believe that it was explained on our side of the house that you also know that you improve the quality of education in general. So we do not understand as a government why people will have less incentive to donate. We believe that you still know that part of this money goes to your university, that's why you will donate, and also you know that you're improving the situation overall in the country, not only in your particular university. Yes, and we believe that it is crucial, because nowadays this situation with people who are not able to get a good education just because the university is underfunded is great, and there are not so many donors right now, just because like the alumni of those universities are not so rich maybe, and also like this problem is not seen so on a large scale, because if you are coming from a top university, you can easily raise some problems like lack of funding. But if you come from a not so privileged background, not so privileged university, even if your university has some problems with the funding, it's not so easy to raise awareness of such problems. But we believe that on our side of the house, we still like these top universities, they still have enough resources, but also we are given such so needed resources which will go to the equipment, to better libraries, to better books for children, and even in this way it is improving the situation better, and it gives an opportunity for those universities to compete with top universities, because right now top universities have too many resources and they are gaining more and more money, which they do not need any more resources. They have all they need. So we are very proud to propose. Thank you very much.
Would like to thank the speaker for the fine speech and for the last speech of this debate. Here for the opposition whip.
Give me a second. All right. So in this speech, I'd like to start off by tackling some points OG has made, and then continuing on to CG, and then hammering in some points that we have made in our first speech. So firstly, the OG idea of redistributing everything to all and then getting a bonus from ranking. OG absolutely misses the point that this is still taking away from the best. This will be followed in when I hammer in some more points that we have already talked about, but taking away from the best is something we principally cannot agree, and that is principally harm in the end sum. And their point of then they continue to the point of competitiveness. Now, my first speaker has mentioned this. When you get competition between Harvard and I don't know, Yale, you get the best lawyers competing against the best lawyers. When you get competition from MIT and Caltech, you get the best electrotechnicians, whatever they're called, competing against the best. This is how you get the best people, the people that will advance robotics, the people that will advance science, and the people that will actually make a difference. When you get competition on a low level, this is like judging a bin room. Yes, you might hear a debate, but it will be shit and nothing will come out of it. When you judge the EUDC top room, this is where the actual competitions happens. This is what it looks like when Caltech and MIT compete. So then most of OG's claims have been rebutted, so I won't dwell too much on this. I would like to take some more on the Marxist ideas of CG. So they like, make no mistake, this is a Marxist extension what CG is bringing you. They're saying they have too much money. What are they going to do with all this money? The government should take away their money and give it to the proletariat, and we should seize the means of education. This is exactly what they are telling you. So when you hear this, you should note that this is directly false. Firstly, on the point that I have already made about competition, and secondly, of this idea that we have brought you exclusively in our extension, and that is the dispersion of wealth for one amazing diploma, for one amazing person, to many average people. But this is even worse than you might have heard it. But the point in this is that it takes you 500 laboratory hours in the best laboratory to make some breakthrough, let's say. But you're not dispersing this so that every university has this. You're giving 3 hours to each university. So now you have taken the ability for one university to make an amazing breakthrough, to make an amazing person in a specific field, and you have given many universities the ability to have the chance, at best, to make an average person in a specific field. So not only are you taking away one potentially amazing person, you are not even creating more potentially amazing people. So you're creating more potentially average people. So your best result is worse than the status quo. And this is the exact point of CG saying, oh, we will help more people. You will not. What you are doing is you are giving more people inadequate means to reach what they need, inadequate means to meet their potential. And what we're talking about is the best of the best. And the best of the best can get into elite Ivy League schools if they truly are the best. You get scouts, you get headhunters who will try to get the best people into these colleges, regardless of their background, regardless of what they are, and they'll pay you the admission fees. The second point that directly rebuttals what CG and OG are saying is the point of alumni giving back. Now, I really want you to think about this. The alumni that finish a college, they give back the money to the university because the university was so good to them. You taught me many things. You gave me good networking skills. Now I can get a job in the field that I desire. Now I can advance the field that I have educated in. Furthermore, the companies that give money to these schools, they're not giving it because they have too much money, as CG would have you believe. They're giving money to these schools because they're saying, you guys make the best people for our schools. When MIT gives to Microsoft, when Microsoft gives to MIT, they're not giving it because they really want you to see the new Windows update. They're giving it to you because they know you will make the best people to work at Microsoft later on. So these are direct benefits that companies and individuals give back to the schools because they extract benefit from this, and the government is now cutting in to this to these interactions, to these donations that you're giving. This is equivalent and comparative to somebody dispersing your wage because, oh, you have so much of it. What are you going to do? Buy a new car? You don't need it. You have for food. Let the government take it away and give it to people who might need it differently. This is the point, because just as you have earned your wage, these institutions have earned the donations that they are getting. They are not dispersed randomly. They're earned because they are the best. And this is why they belong to them. Contrary to even OG's point, they're saying, oh, you get a bonus in the ranking. This is not enough. We have earned the entirety of this donation because the entirety of this donation is needed to advance and to remain what we are. And let it be clear that when CG says, oh, MIT will be MIT regardless of how much money they have, they will not. MIT needs to advance constantly to become MIT. Boston Robotics needs to advance to continue being Boston Robotics, lest they be forgotten in 10 years. And if MIT starts making paper-mache robots, they will not remain MIT for long. They will remain just some school that nobody wants to go to because they do not have the proper funding to actually advance the sciences that they're teaching. And the people that work in these schools, these are Ivy League professors. There's a reason why they're Ivy League professors, is that they're the best. They're the people who write the books that people in other universities read. These people require immense compensation to actually stay and to have tenure at these schools. You will not get these people teaching in, I don't know, Flint University number 3, because they will never do this, even for their own ego, if not even for their own ego. It's for the reason that Flint School number 3 can never provide the compensation that this professor will need to actually teach at these schools. So you're actively harming the professors that are the ones advancing the sciences and that are the ones actually educating these people on how to become the best in their fields. So you're harming the students and the professor and the institution as a whole by robbing it of what is earned. This is the principle that we have brought you from CO, not the mechanisms that not the points that OO has brought, but the principle that CO brings you, and the principle of alumni giving back, that we should not rob them, and the principle of you should not disperse one amazing person's potential to make potentially okay futures for a larger number of people, because this is principally unjust, and this is principally not what the government is here for. Thank you. Proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech. I will now just take a few minutes to make a call, and yeah, I'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks for the debate, guys. To ask whether all teams are here. OG?
Here.
Cool. OO?
Here.
CG?
Here.
CO?
We're here.
Yes, perfect. Just to make sure that everyone is still here and not making coffee or something. I know online debates can work like that. Thanks everyone for this debate. I really enjoyed it. Before I'm giving the call, I would say one major point of general feedback, which is make sure you have the distinction between when you are taking down other teams and when you are like giving active benefits for your side of the house. I do think that on both sides, in all 4 teams, great rebuttal have been made. But make sure that on top of that, you also have your own substantive and try to weigh that off. I think that can help for the clarity of the debate. I ultimately ended up with the following call. I gave the first to opening government, the second to opening opposition, the third to closing opposition, and the fourth, unfortunately, to closing government. I will just go chronologically through the debate now. If there are any questions, feel free to ask me, but please wait until I've done that very comparison, then to make sure that it's clearer and I have talked about everything I wanted to talk about before questions start. Let's start within top half. So OG, what do they do? They first give a model. I think it could have helped with some clarity, but I understand that you didn't have that much time to prep it. I do think that two pretty clear benefits are coming from your side of the house. Firstly, on how on the contextualization, how rich schools and poor schools work in status quo, that rich schools often do not have the incentive that much to keep improving, and mainly then on how those poor schools work and how getting more funds from the donations from richer schools can actually help them. I think the point of better jobs is pretty clear. I do think the whole startups thingy was a bit shallow. I think more analysis would have worked there about how this necessarily works. I do think I ultimately believe that the poorest are more helped by this, by getting a better diploma, by getting better education. I think fair enough. How does OO come into this? I think the first thing they explain is on the concentrated knowledge, and then on how we get less donations, finally something on how it's legitimate. So let's start at how that knowledge clash works in top half. So what OO explains here is, in order to make sure you get breakthroughs, it is better to have the knowledge at one point. Namely, the context they give is that schools are competing with each other, but trying to specialize themselves to make sure that MIT is good at the one thingy and Harvard is good at the one thingy. Sorry, I did not guess all the examples, but it was clear enough. So how do I weigh this off to OG? I do think that it's true that it's important to concentrate knowledge, but I don't think it necessarily engages with the framing that we get from OG, namely the whole idea that those schools often have such a great reputation that the incentive to compete with each other is not so big. I think in order to make the point of concentrating knowledge is important, has to be better here, because I'm now not really sure why the Ivy League schools have that much of an incentive to keep on getting better. But I do think that it is some impact. I don't think it's debate winning on that clash. I do think later in the debate it gets more important, but I'll get to that. Onto the donations, I slightly believe OO more on this when they say, okay, when you have a bond to the university, you are likely to give back to that university, or you want to have your name on a certain fund. I do believe those are all things that fall away. I think OG marginalizes this by saying, okay, but now we all get different kinds of investors, like businesses, etc. I do think that one remained a bit assertive. I do think it mitigates the point of OO. I don't think it takes it entirely down. Well, then finally, there's some point of the whether it's legitimate in the top half. To be fair, I do think this clash remains less important than the other ones within top half, as I don't think that either of the teams necessarily explains why I should care that much for principle. To make that more important within the debate, try to really explain why this principle is so important, where do we see it in society, where does it come from, that can help in order to make it more important, and specifically, how should I weigh those off. I do ultimately believe that I think I buy OG's case more here when they say, okay, we should help the poorest. That's a bigger principle than what OO says. OO says on like basically hands off of the money, but I'm not really sure how to weigh it. How do I ultimately then do this entire clash? I do believe though that there would be a bit less donations if we implement the policy. However, I think OG has given reasons why regarding what happens in status quo with those donations is not so groundbreaking that it's so important that we should like remain it at the way it is. But I do believe that they explain the money that will ultimately go to the poorer schools will have such an impact on people's everyday lives that it will be so important, which means that even if it leads to less capacities on the Ivy League schools, that it really helps majority of society, and I do believe that was weighed pretty well. Is this clear so far? Cool. Then I will dive into CG.
Actually, just a small question.
Yep.
The point about the sum of money and donation that we will get and why this will be reduced significantly, that didn't play anything in the call?
Yeah, but I just outlined that, right? I mean, what you guys explain is I do to some extent believe that less donations will happen, but I do think in order to make that point debate winning in this clash is why do we think that the amount of donations will mean such a difference for the Ivy Leagues nowadays, that it really means that those groundbreaking research is getting less. I do think that remains rather underdeveloped. Therefore, I don't think it is debate winning within this particular clash. Clear? Okay, then I will go on to CG right now. What CG adds is basically two things. Firstly, they explain, as I think response to opening up, about research grants and how they stay. Namely, when you do research, you still get your money for that. It's just not from the donations. Secondly, on how the poor should be helped. So on the first point, what I do think that point does in this debate is mitigating analysis that comes from opening up about why we think that money is important. However, I do think that for one, it does not necessarily take the point down in which opening up still has, as explained, even though it doesn't win from OG in that clash. But I do think in this clash, it is still pretty well explained that this can make a lot of difference for schools. Than just saying that the research grants stay. Okay, therefore probably some research can still be done and that would work. But how does that take the entire point of opening up down? That was a bit unclear. But secondly, I do think it's even harder then to weigh it as separate constructive from closing up. Because research grant stays is the reason that we should redistribute it, does not really make any impact for your side of the house. Therefore, really try to explain what will be the active benefit of doing so. I do think that goes better in the second point, in which they give analysis on how the poor should be helped and how we should break the cycle. I do think some examples are added here on why those poor people will probably be better off on the non-Ivy League universities. However, I'm not really sure whether it's developed to the point at which it is an active new point within this debate, rather than new examples on the analysis that's already been brought up by opening government. Therefore, it becomes hard to weigh this as a brand novel extension within the debate, which made it harder to weigh it up. Specifically then on how this weighs into opening government, I've alluded to it by saying that opening government basically does a lot of the groundwork which the closing government case is contingent upon. Therefore, it makes it hard for them to credit it over OG. Onto opening up, I do think it does some mitigation to opening up when they say that research grants stay, but I'm not really sure why that takes down the entire point that opening up brings. Secondly, I do think that opening up still has decent analysis on why concentrated knowledge and less donations are important in this debate, whereas I'm not really sure why the additional analysis that we get on why the poor should be helped is there the most important in here. I do think that should have been weighed more, which now unfortunately has not been. Therefore, OO also takes that. Is that clear? Cool. Then bringing closing opposition in the mix. So I thought closing up was a bit hard to weigh within this debate, and that's for the following reason. I do think that what closing up does is a couple of things. Firstly, they bring basically two principal claims. Firstly, in which they say that we should focus on the smartest, and then on why the government should not meddle within how the amount of grants university gets. Finally, something on competition and why that should be like exclusive to the big boys, basically. How do I think this holds in the debate? So let's first talk about both the principles that have gotten here. So I think the whole idea of why it's principled just to keep people the money that is should have explained more why this is such a thing that we should value in society, and why this means that we absolutely cannot take this away. I think now the analysis that we get on where we see it in the society is what comes in the whip about taking people's wage away. I was a bit unclear because this is something that we pretty much do in society. So why is it then unjust to do the same for those schools. I think more analysis was needed there in order to explain why it's principally unjust to meddle within the amount of money that universities get. Then on the focusing on the smartest, I do think it is fair to say that, but I do think that the analysis that has now gotten to why other people can't make it was a bit of a claim rather than a fully developed argument, because the analysis that we now get is, okay, but those people have been disadvantaged already from elementary school on, therefore they will never gonna make it within bigger universities. I'm not really sure why that would be true and why they still cannot do anything to keep up with that, especially given the framing that was already brought by OG, in which they say, okay, but at the moment that we give more people the chance to get into these universities, then they will probably get a better degree and get a better way of living. So how do I weigh it off? Firstly, to OG. So I think the most important point that ultimately holds is the competition, which nicely clashes with OG. The first point why I think it's hard to claim is because opening opposition already gives explanation about that they compete with each other within different fields. So why does that then necessarily mean that it would be better when they compete on different fields? I do think there would be some competition there, but why is that competition that is now to some extent there? Why is that such a better thing than when multiple actors can now jump in when they are going to compete with each other? I think the example of judging a bin room at Worlds was fun, but I'm not really sure whether it's the same thing. I think a bit more analysis was needed there to explain why that's the case. Why do I think that? But the second thing is the framing, which also remains unanswered by CO, that OG gives, is the reasoning that, okay, but those universities now often don't really have a reason to improve, as they are already have the biggest reputation. I do think that should have been answered in order to take that down. Ultimately, therefore, I do believe that to some extent it's principally unjust, and maybe the competition will change to some extent. However, I'm not really sure why that. It was hard for me to credit that over the analysis that opening government gives about how a lot of poor people will improve, especially because that principle that they give about poor people also gets weighed already preemptively in the DPM speech. I think weighing there was necessary for CO to take that. Now, unfortunately, that remains unanswered, and therefore OG takes the clash on the long diagonal. Looking at the op bench, I think this is an interesting one, because I do think that closing up does on some things, some of the points that opening up gives extra analysis that at some points is better, but I do think that ultimately that opening opposition still has laid a lot of the foundation about how concentrated knowledge is important. I do think that CO adds on that the whole idea of competition between the best. As I outlined, it was hard for me to credit that, given that what opening opposition says, that they probably do it on different fields. I do think that extra analysis was needed there in order to make sure that it gets more important in here. I do also think that CO gives nicely extra explanation on how the donations work. I think that opening up talks about a group of people that have a bond with it. I think CO then talks about people giving back from, like alumni giving back to the university when they made it. Okay, I do think that's nice extra nuance about how those donations work, but why is that so much more important than the analysis that opening opposition has given? I think that was a bit lacking, which made it harder to credit it over them. I think finally on the legitimacy point, I do think that that opening has laid a groundwork for the legitimacy. I think CO adds on that it's principally unjust to meddle with that. I'm not really sure whether that's that novel in order to credit it over opening up. So to wrap that up, I do think that opening up, for one, gives already a good explanation about how donations works. Two, give explanation on how the knowledge works. Three, explain on the legitimacy already enough. I think that CO needed to tackle either of those and really weigh that in the debate. I think that could have credited you higher within this debate. Yeah. Ultimately, on the back half, what I do think that CO ultimately makes credit over CEG is still the explanation that there is that it is important to focus on the bigger ones. I do think that CG tries to tackle this by saying by trying to talk about the research grants. I do think then again that probably is true to some extent, but doesn't really take the entire point down, because there is still a lot of money that is still important for those specific groups. I also think that CEO answers pretty well to the extension that CG gives about competition and how it gets better. Secondly, on how the wealth of one amazing diploma is so much more important. I do think that remains rather unanswered by closing government, whereas I do think that those responses did a lot of damage to the case of CG. Therefore, they ultimately take that cash. That's basically the call. Are there any questions to the call in general? If not, feel free to approach me for feedback. I think it's probably the most convenient to do that just via Facebook Messenger. If any of you does not have Facebook, please outline it now, then we'll find a different way to get in touch. Who still wants feedback? If not, my name is Daan Spackler. I will type it in the chat. There you can find me. Thank you for what I truly thought was a very interesting debate, and I wish you the best of luck with the other rounds.